Hey, this is Carl Franklin.
And this is Richard Campbell.
And before we start the show, we'd like to bring your attention to some cool conferences we're going to be at in Europe.
Specifically, NDC happening June 12th through the 16th in Oslo, Norway.
All the usual suspects will be there. Hey, and they even let us in.
But don't hold that against them.
No. Well, this is their big show, Richard, the original NDC.
Yeah, which we've been going to for like 8 years.
That's right.
We don't know exactly what we'll be doing yet, but you can expect a great panel discussion.
Yeah, and of course, we'll be in the fishbowl making some great .NET Rocks shows for your listening pleasure.
So go to ndcoslo.com and register now.
And for more great NDC conferences, go to ndcconferences.com. Welcome back to .NET Rocks. This is Carl Franklin.
And this is Richard Campbell.
And we're getting ready for show season here, aren't we?
Conference season is upon us, my friend.
Yes, we'll be in Orlando before long. In fact, before too long at all.
Yeah, it's the week after this show comes out. So I hope you're going to meet us there.
Yeah, we hope so. Hey, I've got something idiotic for Better Know Framework.
I like that a lot.
Roll the music.
All right, buddy, what do you got?
Well, it's an XKCD comic.
Oh.
And it's basically just two people are talking. And one says, one person is on the front steps of what is an apartment, all right? And somebody walks up and says, should I ask? And this person on the steps is using their laptop. And he says, I'm locked out and trying to get my roommate to let me in. First, I tried her cell phone, but it's off. Then I tried IRC, but she's not online. I couldn't find anything to throw at her window, so I SSH'd into the Mac Mini in the living room and got the speech synth to yell at her for me. But I think I left the volume way down, so I'm reading the OS X docs to learn how to set the volume via the command line. And the other person says, I take it the doorbell doesn't work. And then just blank, it's just blank.
Don't need to say anything at that point.
That's it. That's
Randall, you're a genius. He's also the one with the security thing that says, or we could take this $5 wrench to him and get the password that way.
Sometimes the solution is a lot simpler, says Occam's razor.
Yeah.
So who's talking to us, my friend?
I always grab a comment off of one of John's latest shows because he does one or two of them with us per year, and they get a ton of comments. So I got to thumb through a little here. This is a comment off of show 1186, which we did with John talking about spas and Visual Studio Code back in September of 2015. So dipping a little back into an older show. And the pseudonym on this is MG1075. In my investigations today, I believe this is Robert Mungdal. And if I'm wrong, I apologize, but you seem to be using this handle in a few different places. So Robert's comment was, on the one hand, trying to keep up with the latest and greatest JavaScript frameworks and libraries is a good thing. When John delivered his first Pluralsight course on Knockout.js, it was tremendously helpful and fun to learn.
Yep.
And just as important, I was able to leverage the material and bring value to the company in the form of a new, slick application using Knockout.
Yeah.
On the other hand, trying to keep up with the latest and greatest can be terribly non-productive and lead to analysis paralysis. You can spend days, weeks, or even months trying to break down all the pros and cons. Switching to Angular has been a good thing for me as I can do more with it than Knockout. Yet the choices and noise in the community around frameworks has snowballed since the Angular 1.x debacle, let's call it that, to a mind-numbing proportion. When people make breaking changes, they get noisy. There's no two ways about it. Most often, the noise coming from the tech evangelists and bloggers is antithetical to the business goal of delivering a functional application given the constraints of finite time spans and resources. The noise rarely factors in the cost of having to maintain and or refactor code that uses what was once, in a point of time, the JavaScript library du jour. Hanselman brought attention to the idea of dark matter developers, and maybe there is another aspect of this notion, dark matter code. Unlike the frameworks getting all the hype on Twitter, instruction sites, and blogs, dark matter code is the code that may have been popular at one time hey, in the case of Angular 1.x, may have been popular just a couple of months ago,
Right.
but now has been deemed a second-class citizen on the internet buzz. Yet this dark matter code is not going to disappear all of a sudden. Coders will be maintaining and building new things with it for a while. Indeed, they may even be productive with it. And if I heard John correctly, it was a good thing to hear him validate that using the latest and greatest was not an absolute necessity. Personally, I think this point has to be stressed way, way more often among those instructors, bloggers, and evangelists in the world who do push hard on the latest and greatest, even though it may not be in their best interest.
Right.
And that was 2 years ago, and John responded back then, yep, use what works for you.
Yeah.
So, I thought it was really well said, actually, Robert. I appreciate that. And certainly the cascade continues, although I think the pace is winding down a little. So, Robert, thank you so much for your comment. A .NET Rocks mug is on its way to you. And if you'd like a .NET Rocks mug, write a comment on the website at .NETRocks.com or via any of our social media, because every show is published to Google and Facebook. And if you comment there and we read it on the show, we'll send you a mug. And
definitely follow us on Twitter. I'm at Carl Franklin. He's at Rich Campbell. Send us a tweet, but you don't need to use SSH. It's not necessary. Just saying.
Actually, if you could send me a tweet via SSH, I would be impressed.
I would be too.
That would be something.
Just saying, it's not necessary.
Yeah.
Try the doorbell. All right. Well, let's bring back to the show John Papa. He is a principal developer advocate now with Microsoft and an alumni of the Google Developer Expert, Microsoft Regional Director, and MVP programs. He's passionate about web and mobile technologies and often enjoys speaking around the world at keynotes and sessions for conferences including NGConf, Build, Ignite, VS Live, and Angle Brackets. John is co-host of the popular Adventures in Angular podcast, author of the Angular Style Guide, several books, and many popular Pluralsight courses. You can reach John at johnpapa.net or on Twitter at John_Papa. Welcome back, John.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Crossed back in, my friend.
Yeah.
Yeah, once in a while, you just got to go back where you started from.
We couldn't talk about where you worked before, but you can divulge it now, right?
Oh, you mean those 6 years in between my Microsoft employments? Yeah, I worked for the Walt Disney Company for parks and resorts technology.
That must have been a fun job.
Oh, yeah. Had a lot of fun there.
Yeah.
That was like a life goal for you, too, because you're a Florida guy.
Yeah, I really loved it. Just growing up, I'm a huge Disney fan, and my kids love it. My family loves it, and I actually live, within 15 minutes away from Disney, and I drive there all the time. So It was a big thing for me to want to work there and help them make the magic that makes people happy. It's kind of cool to have a job where, you're basically what you're doing is making people have a good time.
Yeah, no kidding.
So let's talk about what comes after Angular 2. Angular 3, right?
No. Hey, come on. You guys, you know this. We talk in binary. So what comes after 1, 2, then I go to 4. The next version will be 8.
The next version will be 8, right.
We'll be at Angular 2024 soon enough.
Well, at least it's only 4 syllables, Angular 4. So...
Yeah, in the whole version thing, there's actually a really good blog post that talks about this. And it's not too uncommon. Like, Entity Framework, I think they skipped from 1 to 4 when they went there.
Yeah.
At one point. And sometimes different teams create a new version just to synchronize everything. Yeah. And what happened was there was an Angular router in version 2 that really took like 3 attempts to get it right. What they did for a while, so Angular version 2 is out, and then Angular's router was version 3. So when they went to the next version, they're like, we don't want to have 3 and 4. Let's just go to 4 and make everything the same thing.
Yeah.
So that's why that happened. They're not going to keep skipping. That was just let's just make life easier for people.
Yeah, and it's not unprecedented in this world of software versioning to do that.
Yep.
Yeah.
ASP.NET, Entity Framework, Node, and IOJS. I mean, it happens all the time.
It's all the time.
Yeah, it's just not that unusual. So did they actually make a new version of the router for 4, or is it the 3 now in the 4 box?
What's cool now, and we could talk about this a little bit too, which I think is really neat, is the Angular strategy. And I had a little hand in this because, and I can explain what that means, was really difficult on enterprises, right? Because like all these JavaScript frameworks, they want to change as quickly as possible. But how do you do that and let enterprises keep up? Because let's say you work for a large enterprise and you have 1,000 apps running on Angular. Well, if they come out with a new version every 2 weeks, like a minor or a patch, and then every 6 months they have a new major, it's not realistic to say, hey, enterprise, just go upgrade all of your apps to that version, even if there are no breaking changes. So what they did is they decided to come up with a strategy called long-term support and short-term support, kind of like Node does.
Yeah.
So that the even-numbered versions now, like 4 and 6, will have long-term support, and then the odd one, version 5, will have short-term support. So now enterprises can kind of stick to one of those versions for a longer period.
Interesting.
Okay.
It's not perfect, but
No.
You also don't want to stay in the same version for 5.5 years, which is what they did with AngularJS, which is what they call version 1.
Well, Microsoft sort of does this with Windows now because the enterprise, Windows is constantly being updated, but enterprises just will not tolerate that. So there are these sort of marker versions of Windows that are, this is when the enterprise upgrades. This is the long-term supported version. We like this cadence when we're developing. We don't like this cadence when we're operating.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a balance, right? Nobody wants to get left behind, but at the same sense, people don't want you to move too fast. So I get that push and pull. And to answer your original question, like with the version of the router, when they came out with version 2 and then they came out with version 4, the router and everything else did get new versions. They all got upgraded, but the breaking changes from the versions that were in 2 to 4 were very minor. In fact, I upgraded literally 20 of my apps and didn't have to change a line of code. So that was cool.
The whole 1X debacle was a fundamental shift in philosophy based on being out in the world with Angular.
Yeah, I mean, they built something 2011. So you're talking 6-7 years ago, this thing was created. And at the time, we had, module problems in browsers, compatibility issues. ECMAScript was still figuring out, are we going to have a good version with modules or not? So they had to do a lot of things that they just don't need to do anymore. And they just rewrote it from scratch with the same fundamental philosophy, but now it's using patterns that didn't exist then, and it takes advantage of TypeScript, which they wrote it in. So it's much more stable and optimized.
Nice. And should we get the plugin for Angular Mix right up front just to get it done?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, what's Angular Mix, Richard?
That's my line, my friend.
I knew that was coming. I figured if I jumped in quick.
That's called a meatball.
There you go. Well, I'll tell you, John. Angular is one of the most popular features of Dev Intersection. No two ways about it. And we're going to continue to do Angular at Dev Intersection. But there's a sort of an energy around, could we do a show solely focused on Angular? And there's a few of them out there. But do one in the style that it's sort of a hybrid between sort of a traditional Angular show and a traditional Dev Intersection show.
Yeah, I'm super excited. We've been talking about this, Richard, for what, like a year, trying to figure out how we were going to pull this off?
Oh, maybe even 2. I mean, you've been focused on Angular for a long time. And the styles are very different, but clearly Angular is going into the enterprise. It's becoming an important part of the enterprise. So how do we, mix together the enterprise developer and the sort of traditional open source web developer and create something better than either one?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, mix is the key word, right? It's how do we mix this enterprisey feel with this open source world? And I see a lot of friction with people trying to use Angular with enterprise software like Visual Studio and other things, or even just on Macs with a lot of enterprise DevOps, cloud services as well. And it's not that it's hard. It's that nobody's really talking about how you put all these things together in a cohesive way. So that's kind of what our show is about. And I think we're really lucky because we've got, I don't know if it's the whole Angular team, but we've got 10 of them coming to this show already.
Wow. Yeah, the lineup
pretty
is
excited.
Crazy. And I also think that Angular's at the perfect moment, like just what you just finished describing before we hucked the meatball out there, where I think we're more ready to talk about Angular in the enterprise than we've ever been before.
Yeah, and the biggest friction with Angular, which is kind of why we wanted to talk today, is, and I'll be honest, I'm a realist. I like Angular a lot, but I'm also a realist that people struggle with Angular. And let me tell you why. The hardest part about Angular is not Angular. It's the stuff you have to do just to start writing code.
It's the ceremony.
Right.
Yeah, it's the ceremony. I mean, you've got to have Node, and some people don't have that. And, typing a command line is easier than doing it from a tool. And then you need to figure out, do I have NPM? What versions do I have? What kind of module system am I using? Am I using Webpack, Gulp, or Grunt? And I haven't even gotten to Angular yet, and my head hurts,
Right. Yep.
So what they've done is they modeled after going back in time. They work with a lot of other teams, and the Ember team created their own CLI, command line interface. And those people basically worked with the Angular team, and the Angular team also talked with the React team at Facebook. They all actually are friends, which is cool. And they worked together to figure out, what can we do to make this easier? So they created this thing called the Angular CLI based upon some of that other interaction and learning experiences. And now with like 2 lines of code, you can just type in, hey, create a new app, and then build it and serve it.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's wicked cool because it takes away all that garbage ceremony that we were just referring to. And to me, this is the number one thing that's going to help enterprises say, I got to get on this.
Now, you still have to have NPM, right?
You do. You still need to have Node and NPM to run that.
Mm-hmm.
But that stuff's becoming easier to bake in these days.
It's
like
easy.
I'm working with the Visual Studio folks to figure out how do we make this a better integrated experience with like F5, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So folks like Matt Christensen and Steve Sanderson and I are working with the Angular team to figure out what's the right way to go there, and then take it a step further. I was just talking a few minutes ago with Donovan Brown about how do we make this a better DevOps experience for the average Microsoft user as well.
Well, that's gonna work, definitely.
Speaking of
Talking to
Steve
Donovan.
Sanderson, didn't he's sort of the principal behind the JavaScript services. Isn't that along the same lines?
Yeah. He's the brainchild behind a lot of that. Boy, he's smart.
God,
And,
he's smart. It's crazy. Like Knockout, which is basically what drove the whole Azure portal, but JavaScript services just blew my mind. It seemed like such a good idea.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there. And, that's the cool thing is like this CLI, I think, is going to help make Steve and Mads and Donovan even's lives easier trying to integrate this stuff. Because now,
Right.
I mean, really what's going to happen is when you press F5 in Visual Studio, to be layers between this, but ultimately they'll just press the Angular CLI's build and serve button,
Yeah.
And
serve basically stands up a little development server, right?
Yeah, it's using Webpack today, but it's under the covers. And let's say, the Carl Franklin library is popular tomorrow. The CLI will help us keep up with the right tools to optimize things.
Yeah.
Under the covers, it kind of hides some of that, kind of like Visual Studio does when you press F5, right?
Mm-hmm.
For years, we didn't really care how it built it. It just built it.
Yep.
So that's what's nice about it. What the Angular team's actually doing is they just announced at NGConf 2 weeks ago or so that the CLI's next steps are going to be to split it out into an SDK as well, that's going to basically take all the inner functions of the CLI and make it accessible to tools like Visual Studio and Atom and WebStorm and VS Code.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
So that's really the next great thing.
So that your development environment knows how to speak to the Angular side of getting things configured rather than just having to script it all yourself.
Exactly. And then you can focus on writing code, which I don't know about you, that's what I like to do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And not worry about how it's actually going to get deployed or built.
So do you find that enterprise developers are comfortable on Windows using a CLI for development, or are they still sort of locked into the UI paradigm?
Both. I see developers getting more comfortable with the CLI. Some of them have gone more PowerShell, and now with Windows 10 with Bash, they're not so bad there. But some folks, very honestly, they still want to press F5 in Visual Studio, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They don't want to hit that little black screen. And this isn't a judgment. This is just the way things are.
It's a cultural thing, right?
Yeah. I think that's why this SDK is so important, which is the next step in the CLI, because then once that's ready, Visual Studio team could just tie F5 into it, and you don't have to touch that little black screen and type in the terminal.
Right.
Yeah. And even just the whole, having, you see a black screen appear and a bunch of stuff ripped by, and maybe there was an error message in there, but you didn't see it. It's gone.
Right.
Like
Yep.
It can get a little twitchy when you start building up these workflows to try and automate that setup and deploy.
I do like the fact that Windows 10 just lets you copy and paste into the command line now. That's just a huge benefit.
Finally.
Oh, I know. It's funny. When I made the switch over to Mac OS, which is the new name of OS X, right? So things never change, right? I was just dumbfounded by how bad my experience was in the command prompt for Windows for 15 years. I never knew how bad I had it until I started using Terminal on a Mac.
Right.
And then these things started coming over to Windows 10 with Bash. And I'm like, yes, finally. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep. This episode of .NET Rocks is made possible in part by Windows on the Google Cloud Platform.
You may not know this, but the Google Cloud Platform supports Windows Server 2008, 2012, and 2016.
It also supports SQL Server versions 2012, 2014, and 2016 standard, web, and enterprise editions with high availability.
You can deploy your ASP.NET Windows apps to Compute Engine or your ASP.NET Core apps to App Engine or Container Engine. That's Google's hosted Kubernetes environment.
.NET and .NET Core libraries are there for all 200 plus Google.com and cloud services in NuGet, led by John Skeet of Stack Overflow fame.
But what about Visual Studio integration? Oh, it's there. You can use Visual Studio to manage your GCP resources and deploy your existing apps.
You get stack driver logging, error reporting, and tracing support for .NET and .NET Core.
PowerShell commandlets for GCP, which run on Windows and Linux.
And a great set of partners to bring your Windows and .NET workloads to GCP, including Capgemini, Neudesic, and Magenic.
So go to gcp.netrocks.com and get your free trial today.
Hey, John, give us 1 second here to pay the bills.
Yep.
You know, we're recording the show before Build, but it's coming out after Build. And it was last Build that we had the bash prompt first presented to us. But it was very much aimed as a dev thing. Do you use it? Does it help you?
It does. It makes it much easier. Like Windows with Node and NPM has always been painful. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it is just the little things, like you mentioned, the copy and paste. It doesn't sound like a really difficult thing to work around, but when you've got all these little shortcuts that you can do in a terminal, and they're all taken away from you, and it effectively becomes just a glorified, notepad. Right. It's really hard to function and be efficient. So yeah, it's made a big difference in Windows terminal development.
Yeah, and I'm going to presume there'll be a hot new version that we can't talk about because we don't know about. Or maybe you know about it because you're now on the inside and you can't talk about it.
I'm still a rookie. I've only been here for 4 weeks, so I don't know a whole lot yet.
Nobody's told you anything, but you've done this before. I got to ask, what brought you back?
A phone call. I got a phone call out of nowhere, and I was told, hey, before you say anything, your wife can stay in Florida. You don't have to move. We want you to stay there forever. We want you to continue doing Angular, work on a Mac. You don't have to change your operating system. You can do everything you're doing now, and even continue with things like Pluralsight and speaking with Richard and other places.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
I'm like, okay, what exactly is the catch?
Yeah, right.
Now, can I ask who the call was from? Because I can guess.
I had two quick calls. One was from Jeff Sandquist, and the other was from Mr. Scott Guthrie.
I bet.
Yeah, I figured.
When the goo calls, it's hard to say no.
It really was, and I had no intention of leaving Disney. I mean, it's I love my Mickey ears. It's love that place. But this is basically a chance for me to go out and do everything I love doing, be a developer advocate, and still do Angular and JavaScript and Node and talk to people around the world. I love it.
Yeah.
And this is actually a new team inside of Microsoft.
Yeah, it's actually a new organization. So we're creating an organization of developer advocates from scratch. We've got like 60 headcount openings, so people should apply. And we're doing things like here's the idea. This is what I love about it. It was pitched to me, and I love this. Don't go to another person's conference and tell them you have to change your tool and you've got to change your operating system and you got to use this instead and use that. And after you do all these things and, basically we've changed everything about you, then you can use Azure. Instead, we're saying just go to where they are, use their tools, talk their speak, use everything that they use, and then just show them how to, use a piece of Azure and say, you know what? You trying to solve that problem where you've got keys that you're storing in your app and you don't want to deploy it to a cloud? We've got this thing called Key Value Store. Maybe you could use that, and tie that into a React app or an Angular app, which, that's a lot better for me because then you're telling people things you believe in as opposed to saying, turn your world upside down.
Right. Well, and people just, I think about the comment I just read from Robert, right? People have to live with this software. People have stuff like they're not going to turn their head. There's no point in saying that. They're not going to do it. Right? You really have to help them solve the problems they have in front of them.
That's exactly. And that's why I like this. And I'm getting the chance now to build a team. And we just hired a couple of people and we're hiring some more. And We're going to have a team that focuses on .NET. Mine's going to focus on what I call the island of misfit toys. JavaScript and Python and Node and React and Angular and Vue. The latest coolness, right? And we'll also have a Java team, and we'll have a DevOps team, and we'll have a security team and an IoT team. It's going to be good, and we're working right with the engineers so we can channel communication back and forth. And I'm excited because really what I do hasn't changed. I'm still doing a ton of Angular, and I'm just trying to make it better with cloud services.
Right.
So where does Angular is all about getting the front end doing all the things, right? Like, where does the cloud play?
That's what's cool. And I was first playing with Azure's latest docs, kind of exploring, because, the docs have had a complete rewrite over the last year.
Yeah.
They're no longer, TechNet. So when I'm looking at it, it's more about, hey, are you trying to solve this problem? Here's how you can do that. And first thing I kind of gravitated towards for Angular was Azure Functions, which is like Lambda in AWS or Google Cloud Functions. And the reason I like it is it solves a really good problem that I've seen over and over again in both enterprises and small businesses. So first, just before I explain what Azure Functions are, I'll explain the problem. The problem I've had is maybe I've got a series of apps that have maybe 2 endpoints, I've built tons of apps in my life, real production enterprise apps where all they do is they search for something, show you the item, and then maybe do some kind of an update to the record.
Yeah.
For example, maybe showing everybody's work schedule at a large employment place, and then just showing you when am I working, and then, okay, I need to make this request for time off. There's tons of these little apps out there, and to stand up a back-end server to handle all the API traffic, whether it's Spring or ASP.NET or Core or Node, there's a lot of stuff that goes into that maybe a front-end developer doesn't want to think about.
Sure.
Or maybe an enterprise doesn't want to support with cost. Do they deploy that with Docker? How many instances do I need, etc.? So in there, all I really want to do is I want to write an API. Okay, search records and save record. That's it. Well, with an Azure function, I can just go in and write the code for that API, and it stands up the server. It's called serverless technology, right?
Yep.
It stands up the whole thing, and now I've got an API that my Angular app can hit, and I didn't have to write or deploy a single server.
Right.
To me, that's the wicked cool thing. It's like, whoa, makes it so much easier.
And it scales like nobody's business, and you don't have to do it yourself. It just happens.
Yeah. It's cost effective, and it's easy to do. I'm like, okay, where's my downside? There's something over here. Nope, nothing there.
Well, what I like that, if you're an MSDN subscriber, and I bet you most of our listeners are, you get an Azure credit already. So you're literally just working in your own Azure account to write those functions. I guess the question then is, when it goes to deploy, how do you pass this over to the company account?
Yeah.
Yeah. And for me, the first thing I did was I wrote it in the portal, which uses like the Monaco tools and stuff that are in VS Code, but instead they're in the browser. But then I said, okay, this is great, but how do I write this in like VS Code and push it to GitHub and have it deploy?
Right.
And that took like a whole 15 minutes to set up. I was like, oh, okay,
oh my goodness,
that throw.
So well, there goes your whole day.
Oh yeah. But that's
I'm
great.
worried about exactly that thing. How do I test it? How do I make it part of an overall package? Where does the source control for it? How does it get deployed? How do I bring IT up to speed on these are the pieces of my app that matter?
Yeah. And don't take this the wrong way though, but you're John Papa, right? 15 minutes for you might be a day for somebody else.
Maybe, or maybe 5 seconds for them. You never know.
We did a show a little while ago with Donovan Brown where he built 4 pipelines in an hour.
Yeah. And
we're like, okay, and his point was, no, you're not going to build 4 pipelines in an hour, but you can probably get 1 done in a day.
Yeah.
It is interesting that the tooling's getting that much better.
It is. And, there's another real big use case, too, for the enterprise for these serverless functions that I like. And let's say you've got a large enterprise and you've got a bunch of back-end systems and all the APIs are there already, but you don't want to build like let's say you're building an Angular app, and you don't want to go ahead and talk to 10 web servers. Maybe one's using, Spring, another one's using WCF, another one's using Web API, another one's using Node. You have to worry about cores and all this other stuff, right?
Yep.
Well, with serverless, you can just spin up this API and you can write your own endpoint that kind of aggregates all those, puts them together, and then serves it to either your Angular app or your React app or your mobile app. And again, now you've used serverless in a new way, which is like tying things together. So there's just so many possibilities. It's like, wow, I had these problems for years and I've been solving them with other lightweight things. Now there's something that's lightweight, easy to use, and it scales better than what I could have done on my own. Mm-hmm. So
sure,
that's attracted me to it. And I didn't even really look into these things until, 4 weeks ago when I started here.
So the CLI is very cool. There's obviously more to Angular 4 than that. But is there anything else that you want to cover here? Maybe the routing stuff?
Yeah, so with Angular, the big things with Angular are, the CLI helps you get started and it builds a lot of the stuff for you. But what's really baked into the new versions is an optimization path. So they have this thing called AOT, or ahead of time compilation, which basically, let's think of it this way. When you run AOT on it, it's like another processor that you run on your JavaScript that then goes through the code and optimizes it so the browser doesn't have to. So on the server during build time, it basically uses the Angular compiler to put everything into the quickest, fastest way it can run it in the browser. And by doing that, it also means you don't have to ship or send the Angular compiler to the browser. So if you think about what the net result is, you build it once in the server, you deploy it, what's going to the browser is smaller on a large app. And then what actually runs in the browser is faster because it doesn't have to think about it as much. It's already preprocessed. And that comes just out of the box with Angular version 4 and the AOT parts. If you use the CLI, you just simply do ng build and you're done, which is really cool.
Wow. It's really interesting to think about. I mean, it was weird enough when we got compilers in the browser for JavaScript back in like the IE 9 time frame. Right? And that's, you think about those times with the V8 engine and with the Chakra engine, that set up the possibility of stuff like Node, or just like JavaScript living outside of the browser. Mm. And now you're talking about compiling code before the browser.
The templates. Yeah. And these apps are obviously smaller because of the compiled templates and faster too, I imagine, huh?
Yeah, with one caveat, and that's if you built a single demo app like a Hello World, what's really shrinking down is this is one of the things, it takes like your HTML templates and it kind of puts them into JavaScript so it doesn't have to, parse through them and ship as much across the wire, all that stuff. If you only have like one template in a Hello World app, you're probably not going to have a smaller app going to the browser. Yeah. But then again, you wouldn't have needed to optimize it anyway, right?
Right.
But in an app with 50 pages, absolutely, it's going to be better.
I kind of like the idea of something that almost doesn't demo well, right? That it has to be, its main benefit comes when something's real.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's kind of the game plan for Angular. What I like about it is it's built, and the guys writing the CLI are great. They have in mind that they want people to, when they start with the CLI, to never run into a wall and go, oh my gosh, now I have to abandon it and go somewhere else because it's not real world. It starts out of the box using the Angular Style Guide, which I'm one of the curators of. And it also keeps you in line with AOT and something called tree shaking, which basically removes dead code out of your app for free. So it does all these things for you, whether you want or care about them or not, which I think is great.
That is great.
And when you say Style Guide, you're not talking about how your Angular app looks, but how your code looks.
Yes, like the clean code type thing. And there's an official guide that I wrote for AngularJS up in a GitHub repo, and the Angular team asked me to write the version for versions 2, 4, 5, etc. On their docs. So yeah, that's what it follows.
Awesome.
Nice.
Hey, Richard.
Yeah, buddy.
Well, guess what time it is now?
Must be that happy time again.
Yeah. It's time to lob an Angular serve at John so he can bash it over the net. See what I did there? That might be the dumbest one I've ever written. It's actually time to give away a DXperience subscription from Developer Express to one lucky member of the .NET Rocks fan club. But first, become a UI superhero with DevExpress UI controls and libraries and deliver elegant .NET solutions that address customer needs today and leverage your existing knowledge to build next-generation touch-enabled solutions for tomorrow. Whether it's an Office-inspired application or a data-centric analytics dashboard, DevExpress Universal ships with everything you'll need to build your best without limits or compromise. Learn more and download your free 30-day trial at devexpress.com/superhero.
Well, all right, buddy. Who's our winner?
Today's winner is Richard Angus from Down Under.
Congratulations, Richard.
Right.
I'll clap for you.
I'll clap for you, Richard. And Richard just won the D-Experience subscription, a big pile of awesome from our friends at Developer Express, just for being a member of the .NET Rocks fan club. And if you don't know what that is, go to .NETRocks.com, click on the big Get Free Stuff button, answer a few questions, and join the fan club. We have thousands of members all over the world. In every show, we like to give away stuff from our sponsors. And every December, we give away a $5,000 technology shopping spree to one lucky member of said fan club. But you have to sign up to win. Okay, John, you know what's coming next. If you had $5,000 to spend on technology, what would you buy?
I would home automate everything in my house. I would buy one of those awesome setups where I can get like the LIFX bulbs, all the different connections for the outlets, for the fridge, for the Nest stuff, even my pool, and get the grill and everything. I'd love to just home automate the whole thing at this point. And
so, what problems are you trying to solve exactly with home automation?
That I never want to get off my couch, pretty much. We just put a couch by our pool area there. I live in Florida, and it's under a patio, and I want to be able to turn the lights on, the fan on, the TV on.
Right. Yeah.
While I'm still coding.
That's nice. Pretty cool. Pretty cool.
Yeah, I've been adding some automation. We went and got a place up on the coast last summer, and I've been adding automation to it to just make sure the lights are on when you get there, and you turn the heat up, before you arrive. Like all those little details that it gets. The funny part is, as I got it working for there, she's complaining it's not working at home. Like just being able to remotely arm and disarm your alarm system, like from the phone.
Yeah, that's huge.
So you just don't have to do that arm now get out in a minute thing. We actually just get everything done, get out, and then when we're in the car pulling away, it's like, okay, now arm it. I got that working on the beach house, and then she's like, why don't we have this at home? I'm like, yes, dear. Okay. When your spouse asks for more automation.
Yeah.
When you do that, and what's funny to me is like my family, I've got a bunch of kids, and whenever we arm the house and we do that, it's like as soon as the first beep happens and it's like warning you to get out and you've got a minute. Yeah. To get out. I'm like, you have 60 seconds. And yet they are all sprinting like Carl Lewis to get out of the house.
On the other hand, you're getting them out the door.
Yeah.
Hey, good point.
Now, I'm just going back to what we were talking about before the break there and thinking, we were using TypeScript because it gave us a set of sort of compilation steps to validate a bunch of your JavaScript code. And then you do ahead of time compilation on top of that.
Yeah, there's, and I'm going to get the sequence wrongs, but I'll kind of tell you what happens there. So the TypeScript stuff helps us at development time to make sure everything is actually working right, and we don't try to ship something that isn't going to work. But during the build, we actually take the TypeScript and we turn it to ECMAScript 6 or 2015, the new name, right?
Right.
Now my own head hurts, right? And the reason we do that is because there's a module system that the ECMAScript came out with. And that module system is needed because, and think of this like C#, we've got all those using statements in C# where we can track down dependencies. Well, by turning it to ES6, we can actually have it go and look up and say, all right, what am I importing? What's the proper dependency order? Who's using what? And that allows us to do things like do tree shaking, which comes next, to say, get rid of any code we're not actually using, but we might have in our project. If I'm not importing that thing, don't even package it, right? In old JavaScript, we couldn't do that because you didn't know what was using what.
Yeah, so you just imported all the things.
Yeah, and you can still do that. And then it does other things too. Like, so you get that down there, and then it does the AOT stuff because it can look through and figure out how do I parse all these templates and get them in place. And one of the additional things it does is it looks to see, hey, where are you using routing? Oh, I see it over here, John. You know what? You're using a lazy loaded module, which means don't actually load this entire set of code until somebody actually asks for it. Mm-hmm. And when it sees that, it being the Angular CLI, when it builds it, it says, I'm going to make a separate JavaScript bundle, a separate file for that lazy loaded module. So that, and I'm going to automatically hook it up so that when you click on whatever link it is that goes to that section of the app, I'm then going to go get that code. And on top of it, it can even set it up to preload it in the background when you're not looking. So these are kind of the cool optimizations that it's kind of building out of the box that we've been trying to hack at for years with AngularJS.
Yeah.
And now Angular's got this stuff just out of the box, which makes it super cool for enterprise dev.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking from an enterprise perspective, does this mean I'm basically I'm not sending the Angular library down to the browser anymore? So in some ways, I've got tougher controls over version numbers now, because I'm doing it all in the back end at compile time.
Yeah, you do, because now you've got to put all that stuff in there, and you're going to have a trimmer, leaner, meaner, set of code to come down.
Yeah.
One of the nice things is the Angular team is really understanding breaking changes suck for everybody.
Yeah.
So they've gotten really good at Semver, which they didn't adopt before, let's be honest, because Angular 1.2 to 1.3 to 1.4 all had breaking changes for AngularJS. With the new version, they're actually adopting Semver, where if they have a breaking change, they're making it wait. And even when they make that breaking change, they're trying to make it in such a way that it won't actually break people, or they'll auto upgrade you, which is cool.
The main thing is you don't want to surprise people. Like, you want it to, if it's going to break at compile time. What you don't want is it's deployed, it seemed to be running, and some feature somewhere just behaves differently or is broken.
Especially in prod, right? You don't want that phone call at 2 a.m. from your vice president saying, hey, nobody can make a reservation for Disney.
Right.
That's not a good phone call to get.
That's a career limiting moment. You might have to go back to Microsoft. Oh, wait, did I say that out loud? That's not right. I'm sorry. I'll take that back.
Yeah. Hey,
that is not what happened. I am teasing my friend.
Oh, man.
So anything new in Angular as far as TypeScript goes?
Yeah, there's a lot. And forgive me a little bit because it moves so fast. Sometimes something new comes out and I forget which version it was in.
Yeah.
But one of the cooler parts that's been coming out lately is they have made it easier to tap into the TypeScript server, which is the stuff that runs under the covers. So there's a new extension, and I'm going to find the name of it, that is built for Visual Studio Code by the Angular team. I think it's called Angular Language Services. So the Angular Language Services, what they'll do for you is, let's say you're inside of a template like HTML, and you're typing in some kind of data binding. And as you're typing in the data binding, it'll actually show you the properties in the component you've exposed.
Nice.
And, with all that dot and IntelliSense stuff. And you can go to definition, find all references. It basically makes your templates more like you've been typing TypeScript.
Wow.
Which is freaking awesome.
Yep.
I love that.
Sure is.
Oh, and here it is in the marketplace. So you can just install this as a module for VS Code, and Bob's your uncle. You're able to read into your own Angular code.
Yeah, it was just announced, I think, 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I'm sure there's still a few quirks in it because I've been using it for a while, but it is really, really helpful.
That's so interesting, right? It's amazing how IntelliSense is just sort of permeated as just a good idea.
Yeah.
And not just in Visual Studio.
And TypeScript's what's enabling all this. The other stuff with TypeScript too is just all the little help you're getting. Like in Visual Studio Code, which I love, one thing I've really hated is that as you're typing Angular, one of the frustrations JavaScript developers have had is they never had to type import statements before. So now with the new module structure, you've got all these imports at the top, which are like the using statements in C#. But if, let's say you got 10 of those, that's a lot to type, right? In C#, we could use tools like, ReSharper in the old days, or even VS right now, where you just start typing something. If it's not referenced, you get a little quick hint that says, hey, would you like me to go reference that for you? And now that works in Visual Studio Code thanks to TypeScript.
Nice.
So I love these little features. It makes typing and coding in JavaScript with TypeScript, feel like you're just doing C# with .NET.
Right.
Yeah, well, it's not interrupting your flow to jump up and add in imports, right? It just, do that for me. You knew what I meant.
And I hear through the grapevine that there may be other features coming soon, too, that are even cooler. And I'm not sure if I can mention them, but definitely keep an eye on that space.
Okay.
Interesting.
Is there anything that we need to adjust or change about our current code in order to move over to Angular 4?
If you're using AngularJS and you're trying to go to Angular 4, there's really 2 options. There's the wholesale, just rewrite it, which isn't a bad option, quite frankly. It's not too hard to do as long as it's a small app. If you're in a bigger app and you want to, let's say you've got an app you wrote and you want to start putting new Angular features in, there's a tool called NG Upgrade. And what that allows you to do is effectively a polyfill, or a shim, if you will, to insert into your app and let you continue running AngularJS, which is version 1.x, and run Angular version 4 with the new code. So that stuff will let you kind of run side by side in the same app with both versions to help you slowly migrate over.
Nice.
And does that change your dependencies to the new versions of them, or?
No, it keeps the old stuff on the old stuff, and it keeps the new stuff separated. The biggest change you have to make is with routing. You can still use both routers together, but obviously you have to make sure they don't collide, and your routes are still separated.
Interesting. I don't want to leave Azure out of the equation too much here because I think it's an important piece. Is there some complexity around getting Angular to invoke something like an Azure function? Like, what's the normal way to call to something serverless like that?
That's what's kind of cool. I did a video at, I think all this is cool, quite frankly.
Yeah, it is.
I did a video at NGConf. I had the honor of speaking after the keynote there a couple weeks ago. And my talk was basically a 20-minute, let's create an Angular app with the Angular CLI. And along the way, I had to invoke, I did it like a Star Wars theme because I love Star Wars. And I had to invoke an API that showed a list of the rebels and the planets they came from. And I'm like, geez, should I create this backend in Node or Express? And I said, I'm going to use Azure Functions. And I set up that function, and the code from Angular it has no idea what you're calling. That's the cool part. You just say, go create an HTTP call over to this URL, and it's going to send my data back. So as far as Angular is concerned, it has no idea it's talking to Azure Functions, but it's really, really simple to do.
Interesting. And what does the URL look like?
You can make your own pretty URL, of course, but out of the box, I think you get one of those. Let me go find mine real quick. I called mine the One with Angular app because that's a Star Wars reference from Rogue One. Like I'm one with the Force.
Right.
So there's one with Angular app.azurewebsites.net is the API I created. But you can obviously do a pretty URL, and you can also do proxies with these too. So if you have to hit other backends, you can make a proxy through there.
Interesting. Oh yeah, and I found it in your GitHub repository. There it is, the one with Angular app, API.
Yep, everything I do is up there somewhere.
Nice.
Yeah, and I'll paste in the URL to one of those endpoints. You have to. I of course enable to only hit it from certain places, but that's kind of what the URL would look like if we can show that in the show notes.
Yeah, for sure. I'll add it. People should take a look at this. You've got a lot of projects and a lot of little things. It's an API call for rebels. Nice.
Yeah, and if you look in the code in there, what's cool is, and I was just showing somebody this today, when you create an Azure function, all you're doing is writing the code for the function that serves the API. You don't have to set up Node and all this other stuff. You just write, okay, here's the request. Did they give me an ID for which rebel they want? Okay, we'll return back Jin Urso. Or they didn't give me an ID. Let's return back the whole list of rebels in an array.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Nice.
So we know that there's a roadmap for Angular 5 and beyond, and they're getting pretty ambitious with their schedule. It looks like Angular 5 around October, Angular 6 March 2018, and man, that's pretty ambitious, don't you think?
It is, and the good news about that is they plan out pretty much each version as they go. And like Angular 4, as you could see, it's really the way they want it called is it's all just Angular. The versions are irrelevant. They want the versions to be less breaking than they've been in the past.
Right.
With Angular version 4, they did that. With 5, they're really focusing more on these optimizations and the CLI's SDK that I mentioned. But yeah, they're going to be doing that long-term, short-term support with these moving forward.
I guess I heard every week they're going to put out patches and then minor releases every month and major releases every 6 months.
Yeah, and it's up there. You're probably looking at the roadmap page. There's a whole schedule that they've kind of done. They kept pretty true to it. I think they released on time in late March with Angular version 4. So I'm looking at, I think they have October, November for the next version 5, right?
Yeah, it looks that way. Yeah. October for 5, March for 6.
It seems fast.
It does seem fast. Then again, they're Google, right? They've got a lot of smart people working there.
You guys, I would like to come back to the initial question that the gentleman asked, was it 2 years ago on the old show?
Yeah.
About, use the right thing, right? And these JavaScript flavors of the week that are coming out. I think something's really important to state about all these things is if you're building a simple one-page thing inside of, let's say, an ASP.NET app, and you're thinking of using Angular, React, or Vue or something else, you really don't have to use any of these frameworks to build just a little nugget of information. Like maybe you just want to display a list of things. It's almost overkill to use any of the frameworks to do that. Where Angular really steps in is when you're building a full-blown app. You want the whole thing to work with routing and, with the history and the back buttons and all that. And it doesn't just work in the browser. It actually works for PWAs, progressive web apps, and other places too. So really want to use the right tool for the right job. That hasn't changed. I kind of found that question when you were reading it to be really timely to say, that is still the same way we should be thinking about things. Use the right tool for the right job and don't jump to the latest, coolest thing.
Good advice.
Well, and there's a cost in training and experimentation and so forth that I think are relatively tricky to measure, but they're certainly not free. There is an overhead to change.
There is. And what I'm hoping for and the Angular team's hoping for too, and this is why I'm on board with it, is they won't have another AngularJS to Angular conversion where they rewrote everything.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons they're doing this rapid 6-month release cycle, because they want to make sure they keep up with the web. Because guess what? The web is changing wicked fast.
Yep.
And you don't want to wait 5 years to get the latest thing.
So true.
I guess, is there a point where this thing is done? Like, is it when it's right?
My wife has found the end of the internet. I know she has. I see her sitting on the couch, surfing the web on her browser, and I'm always like, I think you're on it more than I am. And I joked with her one day, and I made her go to a page that said, you have reached the end of the internet. So
Nice.
She has discovered it. Maybe we'll all get there someday.
Well, as a guy who has most of the undersea cable map in his head, the end of the internet is either South Africa or New Zealand.
Could be Cuba.
Not so much. There's some good wires coming and going from there.
No, nothing yet, though. Really. Nothing really. All right, man. John, it's great to talk to you as always, and we'll catch up with you in a couple weeks down in the world of the mouse.
Can't wait to see y'all.
Yeah, excited.
All right. And we'll see you next time on .NET Rocks. .NET Rocks is brought to you by Franklin's Net and produced by Plop Studios, a full-service audio, video, and post-production facility located physically in New London, Connecticut, and, of course, in the cloud. Online at pwop.com. Visit our website at dotnetrocks.com for RSS feeds, downloads, mobile apps, comments, and access to the full archives going back to show number 1, recorded in September 2002. And make sure you check out our sponsors. They keep us in business. Now go write some code. See you next time.
Got a transmitter banned by the FCC.